After puffing the cigars for a 14th straight time against the Tennessee Volunteers, Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide preparing to take on Mississippi State this weekend at Bryant-Denny Stadium. We're hitting you with another game day preview touchdown. Alabama Magazine. I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith.
And I'm Patrick Dowd. And Stephen, Alabama got a big win against Tennessee last week, but also suffered a big loss in losing Jaylen Waddle for the season.
Came at a very costly price there, Pat. Absolutely. Losing somebody that is a dynamic playmaker, an exceptional weapon, somebody who puts so much stress, frustration, fear on opposing defensive minds, defensive players. Nobody did that more than what Jaylen Waddle does it, and was having an incredible year prior to the injury. According to Nick Saban, of course, Waddle has had the surgery. It was a right ankle injury it was a right ankle sprain with a fracture involved. Of course, all thoughts and prayers are out to Waddle and his family as he tries to heal from the surgery and get set for the rehab, which starts in about 6 to 8 weeks. But while for most programs, an injury like this would cause teams to go on the tank, and although losing Waddle a ginormous disappointment here, Coach Saban thrives in recruiting the best at the wide receiver position, and he's got some guys, Pat, that look to maybe pick up some of that slack there left behind from the Waddle injury.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I mean, Nick Saban mentioned this, there's really no replacing someone like Jaylen Waddle.
Absolutely not.
He's an absolute game breaker, attention grabber. I mean, he made countless big throws. He puts so much stress on the defense. But Alabama, you saw last game, you saw Slade Bolden step up a little bit, make us a couple tough catches down the line. And I mean, he's probably going to be one of the guys to step in terms of that role. He's probably the more experienced player down the depth chart. But then you look at guys like Javon Baker, who's another speedster who might be able to see some action, and a couple other guys. But, you know, it's going to be tough. It's going to be done by committee. And even then, and that might not be enough to replace his production. But Alabama still got John Mechie. They still got Devontae Smith. They still have a ton of talent in this offense. But losing Waddle is definitely going to be big for them.
They got a lot of guys in this offensive repertoire, as you mentioned there, Pat, going back to Devontae Smith, the consistency that he shows, John Mechie, the rise and the emergence that he has put in to the table. But Slade Bolden, a lot of people fail to realize this guy also is a flat-out athlete, played a number of different positions in high school in Louisiana, was the Gatorade Player of the Year in 2017, and he talked about it. Yes, he's not Jaylen Waddle, but he's going to give you everything he has. And when you talk to players about Bolden, they look at him as, you know, he's Julian Edelman meets Wes Welker meets Hunter Renfrow. There's a lot of big names throwing that pot of gumbo right there, but it'll be fun to watch Bolden. But Javon Baker, here is the guy that Jordan Battle, sophomore safety, said this week in player interviews, he's got Amari Cooper type ability. And if Baker is anything close to what Coop was in his career at Alabama, college football definitely in for a rude awakening. But going to the defense here for a moment, Pat, this is a group that under Nick Saban starting to make some improvements here. It was embarrassed against Ole Miss in that matchup, but we're starting to see a Bama defense that's not making the big boom improvements, but taking those gradual steps.
Yeah, over the last 6 quarters, they've been playing a little bit better on defense, But, you know, like they forced some turnovers against Georgia. They did the same against Tennessee, and they held them to over 20 points, which I think was, I believe, the first time they did that all year, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, Tennessee's offense wasn't anything special. But at this point of the year, I think it's all about momentum. You know, Dylan Moses is playing a little better. So is Christian Harris. The defensive line is getting up and going. I mean, but they just got to keep pressing on defense. You know, in terms just keep the momentum going, keep things rocking and rolling. Hopefully, Pete Golding is getting into a little bit more of a groove here. But, you know, going up against an offense like Mississippi State, he's going to be throwing the ball a lot. It's going to be another big test for them.
Going to be another huge challenge. Another thing on that defensive line there, Pat. Byron Young's played well. Byron Young has played really well at 6'3", 292 pounds, the sophomore from Laurel, Mississippi. Now, his role is going to increase more this week due to Brian Ray still battling the elbow injury. Coach Saban talked about it. He's still very questionable for this game, and because of that, we could see a lot more here of Byron Young. Now, for me, I want to see the secondary, and particularly at the safety spot, really make this big improvement, because Daniel Wright this season has been feast or famine. He either makes the big play and people are proud of him, or he whiffs on the big play and people are staring at him as to say, what in the world are you doing? Whether it's either him or Jordan Battle, who's got to get his speed in order, probably needs to get with Dr. Matt Ray and working on that. But Alabama defensive secondary, that's where I want to see the improvement come this week, because as you mentioned, playing against a Mike Leach, he's going to want to throw that ball all around the field with KJ Costello at quarterback. But in the running game, Pat, I mean Najee Harris doing his thing this season, and he's got to continue this against a defensive front in Mississippi State. Doesn't create a lot of sacks, but this front does have a lot of experience. Najee, another week where he can just plow through a defensive front.
Yeah, the campaign's got to keep rolling for Najee this week, and I think it's going to be key for him to be able to move the ball on the ground, because like we mentioned, Mississippi State throws the ball a lot. It'll be important to keep the clock moving against this team, kind of shorten the game in terms of possessions. They don't get so they don't have a lot of opportunities to score more points in their defense. So Najee Harris will be a big factor in this week.
Najee, so far this season, 103 carries, 595 yards rushing, 14 touchdowns. He's first in the SEC in all three of those categories. He's also first in the nation with the 14 touchdowns. But as we get into Mississippi State, this is a very weird matchup for me, because to start the season, State was the talk of college football. You go into Baton Rouge, you take on an LSU team, you lay 44 points on them. KJ Costello has over 600 yards passing, and people are like, whoa, holy cow, Mississippi State, look at the cowbell over there. But we all know this was not the same LSU from last year. You lose 14 to 16 players to the draft. You lose 2 coaches. You lose guys to opt-outs due to the COVID situation, and guys trying to prepare for the NFL. So it's not the same LSU, but after the win, State has really struggled, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, and particularly on offense, and especially it's odd when you look at, since they made a big splashy hire and Mike Leach bringing his passing-oriented offense to the conference, but they're 10th in the SEC in offense this season and only get 18.5 points per game, and they've kind of struggled passing the football this year. They lead the conference in interceptions. KJ Costello, I believe, 6 touchdowns, 10 picks. And it's not getting any better. They're not getting any more reinforcements this year. They're actually losing some guys. I mean, Kylan Hill, their star running back from a year ago, really hasn't gotten a lot. He obviously hasn't gotten a lot of carries, but he's their second leading receiver, and he's going to leave and prepare for the NFL draft as far as we know. And it's going to put a lot of pressure on a receiver like Osiris Mitchell, who's the only other offensive player who's the only other receiver, on offense with over 20 catches. I mean, he's going to have to make some plays. They're going to have to manufacture. They're going to have to manufacture some sort of offense. They cannot turn the ball over against this Alabama defense, especially if it's struggling or if it comes into the game struggling. They can't give them wins like that. They can't give this offense more opportunities to score points.
Now, for Mississippi State in this game, it's going to have to be the defense. The defense is going to have to keep this as close as humanly possible. Now, State defensively in this game, they're coming in giving up 26.8 points per game. That's a lot of points still, but at the same time, you're going to have to try to keep it as close as possible, giving up 295.5 yards per game. State is led by Ero Thompson, the senior at linebacker. Thompson, 39 tackles here on the team. They do have a couple of sack specialists. As I mentioned, State has about 12 sacks this season. Junior linebacker Tyrus Wheat, 2.5 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. On the defensive line, there is senior Marquise Spencer. 2.5 sacks, 5.5 tackles for loss. Emmanuel Forbes, the freshman defensive back, 2 picks to lead the team. He does have a pick 6 and 2 pass breakups. They also have another linebacker in sophomore Aaron Buell, who's got 3.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. Now, there have been a few of these Alabama players in practice this week, Pat, representing some of these guys here on the scout team, as I've listed here on the paper. So for Mississippi State defensively, they have got to find some way, shape, form, or fashion to keep this game as close as they possibly can try to keep it. It's at Bryant-Denny. Normally, State has always kind of been one of those teams that play you tough, that play you physical. They're either going to keep the game close or you're going to injure one of your players in playing against State. Of course, last year, we all saw the the brutal, gruesome hip injury that was Tua Tagovailoa in Starkville last season. Of course, Tua fine now, better now, playing in the NFL. But for State, with an offense that's struggling under Mike Leach, that's going through his own purging process, not like the movie The Purge, but he's getting rid of all the guys that do not quite fit his system there in Stark Vegas. So for State, they're going to have to find a way. How can we keep this close? How can we manufacture some offense? And how can we try to some type of way, shape, or form to limit what Steve Sarkisian and Alabama's offense is doing? But Pat, we look at the line here on this game. It's 31. It seems like every week, with the exception of the Georgia game, the line is increasing.
Yeah, it just keeps climbing and climbing. I mean, 31 points is a lot of points. I think Alabama will cover, but, you know, you never know against Mississippi State. Well, they'll have enough opportunities to score a lot of points, but 31's a lot. I think Alabama will cover, though.
You got Alabama covering this.
Yeah.
You got Alabama covering the 31. I got Alabama slightly in the under 31. I don't think it gets the whole 31.
I wouldn't be shocked.
I don't think it gets the whole 31. I feel like in the second half, you could see Bryce Young take the field. In the second half, you could possibly see, well, you probably may not see Bryce Young take the field, but I don't think Alabama covers the full 31. Somehow, in that second half, State could probably backdoor its way into that point spread. But we'll see what happens, though. Ladies and gentlemen, Alabama, Mississippi State this weekend on Halloween night, Saban's birthday, 6 p.m. Central Time kickoff, Bryant-Denny Stadium, ESPN. We'll have the call on the matchup as Alabama going after win number 6 of the season on Saban's 69th birthday. But for all of us here at Touchdown Alabama Magazine, I'm yours truly, Stephen M. Smith.
And I'm Patrick Dowd.
And we will see you guys next week.